Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to today's webinar, how to be a great campus partner, a fireside chat with leaders in college recruitment. I am joined by Winnie Tu, Jessica Nguyen, Fiona Kong, and Zoe Wren. Zoe Wren joins us from our sponsor, Jim. She's their marketing campaign manager. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Zoe, and she's kind of got some words of wisdom to share with us. How are you today, Zoe?
Good. Thank you, Josh. Hi, everyone. I'm Zoe. I'm very excited to be here today and to hear our great panelists, Jessica, Winnie, and Fiona, share their best practices on how to drive successful campus recruiting operations. GEM is proud to be sponsoring this webinar as we strive to be great partners with enterprise talent acquisition teams and empower them to engage their entire talent network, optimize outreach and nurture efforts, and build high-quality talent pipelines. I have a quick intro video to GEM to show you, and then we can dive into the discussion. If the video piques your interest and if you'd like to learn more about GEM, please feel free to request a demo or contact us at sales@gem.com. Thank you. Josh, feel free to take it away.
How long does it take to hire a data scientist? I wish I had more qualified candidates. How are we tracking against our diversity goals? Sound familiar? You need GEM. Quickly build talent pools. Reach out and automate your follow-ups. And manage your entire pipeline. GEM shows which candidates need an interview, an offer letter, or feedback from an interviewer. And real-time insights to help you plan for the future. Need to know how many hires you're on pace to make this quarter? Or your offer accept rate? Or how about your pass-through rates at every stage of the funnel? Yeah, GEM can help. GEM works with the tools you use every day and has the security you expect. Did I mention users love GEM? Cultivate better relationships and hire more quality candidates with GEM.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and big thanks to Jim for making today's content possible. I've placed the HRCI and SHRM credit codes in the chat. There is a chat feature located on the right-hand side of your screen. If you've got any questions for our panelists today, please use the Q&A tab on the chat feature. This is meant to be a fireside chat and an engaging conversation, so please jump in, and if you've got questions or comments, we want to hear from you. Before we get started, let's just kind of start with around the room introductions, if we could. So I just want to hear, who you are and a little bit about your background and what brings you here today. Winnie, I'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending. Just introduce myself. I'm Winnie. I'm the interim program manager here with HCSS, a software company for heavy civil construction industry. I've been in talent acquisition for like the past 5 years now, and mostly done a lot of university recruiting, managing our intern program, as well as still doing full lifecycle recruiting across the whole company. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Jessica, we'll go to you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Nguyen. I am the University Relations Manager for Mohawk Industries. We are the largest flooring manufacturer in the world. Before coming to Mohawk last year, I actually transitioned from higher ed. So I spent a few years in career services. Prior to that, dual enrollment and adult education, and actually came from a counseling background before getting my doctorate in higher ed. So they brought me on to, be a great campus partner because I was already on campus before.
Thank you so much for being here. And Fiona, we'll go to you next.
Oh, there we go. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So I am the senior manager for university recruiting program at Samba Nova Systems. We are an AI platform company building custom hardware and software to accelerate for state-of-the-art AI solutions. And I basically joined Samba Nova a little over 3 years ago to build out the UR program. Technical recruiting in the UR space is basically all that I've ever known since I've graduated college and began my professional career. And so, so all in all, that I'm going to age myself a little bit, but it's a little over 10 years now of technical recruiting experience in this space. And yeah, outside of work, I enjoy reading, though I don't do as much of that as I would like to, and bouldering and catching up on shows.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we really dive into kind of the nuts and bolts of college recruiting and all of that, I'd like to just kind of get a lay of the land. I feel like talent acquisition as a whole has shifted and changed quite a bit due to the pandemic. And I don't want to harp too much on the pandemic. We were all there. We know what we've been through. But in your opinion, how has campus and college recruitment shifted over the years? And were there differences before the pandemic and now?
Yeah, I could definitely speak on that. I recruited before COVID, during COVID, and then post. And so before, this going in campus, to working with like parking, transportation, all that, right? I'm pretty sure all of you guys understand the struggles behind the scenes of the logistics. And then during COVID is when we were on a hiring freeze for a while too. But we were still doing a couple of events like info sessions with like student organizations, and still kept in touch with like the career center staff just in case, just to kind of, keep them in the loop that, hey, we're still going to be hiring eventually. But we still want to keep in contact with them. And so during that time, that was like 2020, we did a lot more virtual events. And then post-COVID is when we started doing more hybrid events. And so that's when I think student officers wanted to do a lot more like in person, but they also found out that a couple also like virtual, which was more convenient for a lot of students too. So it really depends on the makeup of the audience who you're speaking with. That nowadays most of the universities, like the career fairs in general, have been requiring to come back in person, but they give a virtual option too. And I think honestly, the students are definitely craving to come back in person and want to have like that face-to-face interaction and have that handshake. And it's kind of being able to and get some swag items too while you're at it, right? So I think, but yeah, for sure, the students are eager to come back.
Yeah, basically echoing Winnie, what we found, so, we're not, one of the mega companies, right? We're a fairly small startup. And so, this is coming from, and for a long time, we were in stealth mode. So that's like the type of company and perspective that I'm coming from is, for the first year of the pandemic, right? It's like all of us, it was new to all of us. And a lot of companies were in a hiring freeze, right? Because they were kind of unsure of how long this pandemic was going to last and, how that would impact the economy and things like that. And I think students also were very nervous in terms of what their job prospects were. And so when the first season of like virtual recruiting, I felt like students were just trying to grab onto any events that they could get themselves like signed up for and registered for and that they learned about. And then, as we all, or many of us experience, right, it's like Zoom fatigue. Everything is just like over Zoom where everything's virtual, including classes, right, and things like that. And so by the second season, right, from the students' perspective, I think they got a lot more savvy and protective of like how they were using their time. And then also companies, right, sort of like understanding like, okay, we just have to learn how to do business in the pandemic, right? So we're going to continue hiring. And so I felt like things sort of went back to normal in the sense of the amount of engagement that we would get. And then as Winnie shared, like this academic year is really the first time that most companies, right, are returning to in-person recruiting. And, we hear this from all of our campus partners that students are really craving. And we see this ourselves when we're back on campus too. Like, students are really just craving that in-person interaction. And me too, I forgot. I forgot how much I enjoyed being, on campus and interacting with students in person. But I think something that we did learn from virtual, even though there is this preference for in-person, is that there is a population, right, of students who, for whatever reason, have to dial in virtually, right? And also being able to provide events in a virtual format also opens up the net for, the range of students that we're able to get in front of and engage with. So I think it's kind of like learning to be experts in both, right? And leveraging both. Yeah.
I like that. So some of the changes that I'm hearing is the fact that, Winnie, you kind of mentioned that you're needing to kind of, for lack of a better word, keep the students warm. Like, there's a hiring freeze. So really staying on the radars of different students, like, hey, don't forget about us. And then it also seems like for everyone, not just the students, but people on this side of the fence as well, and really across the board, their expectations and things that they need are changing. I think for a long time, we were constantly hearing work from home and we can be just as productive virtually and all of that stuff. But we're hearing from a lot of people that they actually want to be in the office. And I know that early in my career, the things that I learned by being in the office, I'm not sure if I would have learned them as effectively had I not been in the office. And I think a lot of people early in their careers are wanting that in-person experience so that they can really improve their skills and really master the jobs that they're going to be in. So we kind of talked about what Gen Z is wanting. I want to kind of dig into that a little bit deeper. Are there other things that you think these graduating students want organizations to know? We mentioned in person. Is remote work important to them? Like, is that a component? Like we said in person, but do some of them want to be able to work from home part of the time? Are there any other specific things, maybe like communication of career paths or things like that are equally important to students? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
I was going to say, kind of to your last point there, Josh, about other things they're wanting in the career pathways. I think we're finding that a lot, that they really want to know what is their growth pattern at the company, what areas can they go into. We actually have a program at Mohawk. It's called Aspire, but it's a leadership development rotational program. And so it's for recent graduates, and they really enjoy that because they don't have a whole lot of experience sometimes. And so they're not quite sure what they want to do. And so that program actually, say they're a marketing student, we actually put them into an area of marketing, and they'll go through 4 or 5 rotations through different areas of marketing for a company, like channel marketing, PR, social media events, and get an opportunity to work in those different areas and kind of figure out what their best fit is. And then after finishing that program, we're able to put them into a role within their best fit group or department for them to continue growing. And Mohawk's really great about letting people move around as well. So I get that from interns that come in and join the company full time as, hey, I think I want to explore this area. Can I, if an opportunity comes open, can we move here? But I've also seen research from Ripple Match recently that said 70% of students think that they should get a promotion and title change and that salary change within the first year that they're at a company, which I found a little surprising. I feel like I'm not that much older than them, but it's growing. And so I remember thinking, 2 years for a promotion was what we were expected, or to get any sort of growth. And so they're expecting it within less than a year now. So I think that's something to be aware of.
I feel like you've probably interviewed my son because he falls into that camp. He's like, I'll be a manager within 6 months.
Oh, yes.
Sure. Are there any other areas? I mean, things that come to mind are like work flexibility, benefits, community involvement, maybe the mission of the organization. Do things like that come up, and how are you communicating this to the students?
I'll just add a little bit. I feel like, yeah, a lot of the candidates that we work with, and in general, like Gen Z, like the way that they view their career and a company, right, and a job is very much about like, it's a two-way street, right? It's not so much about like what can I offer the company. It's really like about alignment, right? And having a clear sense of like what is it that they want, and being able to see if the company can provide them. And then especially, with the internet and stuff, like candidates these days are interviewing with way more companies at a time. They end up with way more offers than, maybe even like 10 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago. And we're seeing this even on the experience recruiting side, right? And so it's really like a matter of like shopping around and finding the best fit. And so I don't know that there's necessarily like a single thing that like, oh, Gen Z is like really looking for this thing. But I think from the employer side, it's really understanding that there is no one size fits all, and having flexibility is very important. Of course, on the other hand, something employers need to think about is like, well, what is our culture, right? What are our values? And obviously these are things that we need to hold the line on, and make sure that just as early as possible, like identify and be clear, like, okay, are we even aligned on these things, right? Like, do you have the traits and attributes, to be successful, at our company? Obviously we will support you and stuff, but it's like, some people work better in certain types of environments than others, right? And it's not like a good or bad thing. It's just a matter of fit.
We've got a question from the audience that I want to jump to really quick. Carl asks, first, it starts off with appreciation. Thank you for the insight from the panel. Interested in how organizations represented have found creative ways to partner with school career services departments. Where have there been opportunities to move out of a transactional connection, only being a part of a job career fair type of situation, to more relational connections?
I could definitely speak on that question, because I try to figure out as many ways to kind of be creative as possible, because we're not a big name company either. And so I have to have a more targeted approach in terms of like making relationships with the schools or new schools or even new student organizations we're trying to target, right? And so I usually go out of my way to like volunteer my time to help the career center. So a lot of times, one of the local schools around here, they always ask for volunteers to help judge case competitions, present mock interviews, do mock interviews, or presenting a workshop on resume tips and things like that. And so I would volunteer my time to do that. And it's usually like an hour or two, or maybe a half day of doing it, going on campus or virtually. And so they see that, and they like the involvement from them. And so I think that will help from an employer standpoint to give them time, and they're like, oh, they're interested in us and want to recruit from our student base as well. And so we'll try to give you as many resources as we can to help you connect with our students. And so asking them connect with like the student organizations that are best relevant to your openings will help you establish that connection, because all the student officers rotate every semester. So if you're trying to connect with like a student organization, especially if for DEI initiatives, then your best bet is to figure out which ones are active through the career center staff, because usually most of the time they're like the faculty advisors for it. And so that way we can connect with them, and then doing like workshops and joining in on their happy hours or social activities, not just like the general info sessions or job career fairs. And sometimes they have their own mixers too. So it's not hosted by like the university, but the student organizations will have their own mixers, and I would attend those, and we get a lot more ROI from them instead, and engagement versus like the general career fairs, which we still go to just for like recognition and brand. awareness, but that is how we kind of approach from our point of view here.
I'll say I've got a lot on this one. So I'll try to remember them all. As Whitney said, we do the career fairs, but more for branding. So I have a team of myself and one university recruiter. And between the two of us, we have about 12 school campus partners, and we do about 50 to 60 events a semester. And only about 15 to 20 of those are career fairs. And so, much like Winnie said, we offer to do resume reviews, mock interviews, but think about the things that career centers are doing. So, coming from that side, we host workshops on soft skills, how to interview, how to job hunt, all of those types of things. So, all of those presentations that they might be doing, if you guys have ways of doing them or can come in and talk on them, that helps out the Career Center. You sometimes have a staff of 10 to 20 people who are serving populations of 15,000 to 30,000. They can never hit all of those students. So anytime that you guys can come in and help by doing a presentation, UGA that we partner with has a program called Arch Ready, and they actually do a specific certificate for students that participate in that program. But it's all around employment and professional and personal development. And so they have employer partners who come in and teach those sessions. So doing things like that, offering capstone projects for your senior classes is another great way to get involved. It's a great way to identify potential candidates for jobs or internships as well. But finding those things that you can do outside of it that help out a career center and take something off their plate is a great way to be a campus partner, and a different way of getting to engage with the students one-on-one. Like Winnie said, I think we get much better ROI on those events when we get to make those personal connections to students than we do at a career fair. So those are some ways to do it. I know I had a bunch of other ideas running through my head, but I can't think of all of them at the moment. But I'm sure Fiona's got something too.
I'll just add a couple more things. But yeah, basically, what both Jessica and Winnie said. And I mean, at the core of it, right? And I know it's silly, but it's really about like, you have to care, right? Like you actually have to care and you have to put in the work. There is no like easy shortcut, right? And so on top of what they've all suggested, a couple of other things that we have done is also suggest to, because we work with multiple different schools, right? So sort of like knowledge share, like, hey, we've worked with this school and like they have this event. And I think like, do you guys have something similar? If not, like we saw really good interest from students. Another thing that I personally really like being a part of is like industry panels, right? It's like, I actually don't always prefer like company specific events because especially for like career advice or professional development, because every company is a little bit different, right? Like even what we want to see on a resume is a little bit different. And so students, obviously they can find all this information online, but they get conflicting information. They're like, wait, but this one article says this, or this one YouTuber says this, like which one is right? And if they could just hear all the different answers on a panel, then they're like, oh, it really is just that. Every company is a little bit different. So those are the types of events that I try to encourage if they don't exist at universities, or if they are, like I like to be on those. And then the other piece in terms of like branding as well is like sponsoring like mental wellness breaks, or maybe like prior to final exam or midterm exam week, just having like sponsoring some snacks or something for, students and stuff like that. That's kind of like low hanging fruit as well, just to kind of have your name out there, and it's not like explicit recruiting, right? But still getting students familiar with your name.
I really like that. Finding ways to make their student experience a little bit easier, or just kind of indicate, hey, we're here for you. We're here to help. I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. That last question was a great kind of lead into a question that I had already planned on how to be a great partner with schools and universities. I'm curious, is there a secret sauce on how to identify which schools and universities you're going to partner with?
Typically, I kind of look at the makeup of our current employees first, because it's just a lot easier if they're an alumni of like a university that we can at least make a connection with and try out, even if they, like for instance, one university is more big on like public affairs and criminal justice and education, but that's not usually the type of majors we recruit from. However, we are open to like all majors, and so I wouldn't want to close the door on somebody, because what if the student majored in something and that's not exactly what they wanted to go into, so they're trying to make a career switch perhaps. And so I wouldn't close. I would be open, exploring as many universities as we can based off on our current makeup of our employees first, and then I do kind of some research online to figure out like which schools have like a good, maybe a particular CS technical programs, and then kind of branch off from there depending on our budget, of course.
We've got some questions coming in.
They are.
We've got room for other responses to the question as well, so I can hang back. Jessica, it sounds like you've got something to add.
Yes. I was going to say we do a little bit of what Winnie does with looking at the makeup of our current employees, but a couple of things that we've had to look at, because I recruit for a lot of majors. We cover corporate and our manufacturing plants. So I've been told basically I can't do construction, I can't do criminal justice or healthcare. Other than that, we probably have a position for you. So, and thinking about that, we look at schools who, one, have students that are from the areas that we're looking to put them in, because they're more likely to potentially move back home or want to be near family. So we've had a hard time relocating people. And so we look for schools who have populations of students that are from our general area. And then, of course, obviously looking for those majors and seeing where they're ranked, but also thinking about it, not going after all of the top schools, and looking for maybe those middle ground ones sometimes, because everyone wants to go for us down in Georgia Tech or your UGA students. Georgia Tech students, if I'm being honest, probably aren't going to come to Mohawk. They don't want to be up in rural Georgia working on flooring, where when as a tech student, they've got Atlanta and Google and Amazon right there to work at, or Delta to work with. And so I try to be strategic about picking schools that are going to have a lot of students in the majors that we're looking to get from, who have rankings for their programs, but maybe students are going to be a bit more open to coming to work at Mohawk as well. So kind of trying to take into account where their student population is coming from, where they're based in level of, what companies are recruiting from there, and can we compete? And then looking to see how many students are available or actually in that major that we're trying to recruit from.
And I'll just quickly add, like, yes, all of those. And then on top of that, it's like once you sort of have that list of schools, is really figuring out like which of those schools have like the support and infrastructure to have like a good partnership with you, right? Because there are definitely certain schools where it's like they check all the boxes of like, yes, this is great. And then they're just like, whether they're understaffed or whatever reason, right, not very responsive to you, right, and things like that. And it's like, for recruiting, we really need to have a good partner, like on the campus side, right? So that's like the other piece that we pay attention to, is like when we do that initial research and do initial reach outs to understand like what opportunities of engagement are possible, to kind of sense how that communication is.
I want to add one quick thing too. Give them time. So as you build those new relationships, it takes at least a year, I would say even 2 years of being active on campus and working with them before students really get to pick up that interest in your company and really start to recognize your brand on campus. So I know if you guys are like us, like our leadership is like, well, we didn't recruit anyone, or we only got 2 students from that school. Why are we still going there? And it's like, we just started going there. Like, you've got to give it time to build. So just keeping those kinds of things in mind and not saying, we went to one event and got nobody, so like, let's write them off.
I'm hearing from Jessica kind of like expectation management, which is really good. So setting realistic expectations. We might not necessarily get students from these top tier schools. It makes sense to kind of spread the net, kind of look at different areas. Does anyone here ever help with kind of the curriculum of schools, kind of give insight on skill gaps, kind of say, hey, we're hiring a lot and what we're seeing is the folks that are graduating, they're kind of missing expertise here and here. Do you provide insight like that maybe helps schools, or is that not really in your wheelhouse?
I sometimes help the professors. So every now and then we do like corporate engagements in terms of sponsoring projects, like capstone projects, for like a semester long thing or a year round thing. And sometimes I kind of give them some insights of what I've done with like other universities. So kind of like sharing my methods with one university with another. And so just to kind of help them also engage better with like employers in general. And so I do, so it's kind of like a partnership, like win-win type of relationship, right? Just trying to help each other out because I'm very passionate about like helping out the students in general. So whatever I can do to help them so they can help the students as well would be great. So.
Got some questions coming in from the chat. Zach says, thank you for being here. I'd love to hear how the panelists have honed into building a partnership with tech-focused student organizations and departments. Most of our interns this year will need to be CS majors, particularly if there has been sponsorship of hackathons, coding workshops, or scholarships.
Yeah, I could definitely speak on that. So we hire a lot of CS, CIS, and MIS majors at our company. I would say it is definitely helpful being in front of the students. So we have sponsored hackathons before, but they're definitely a long-term investment versus like immediate hires. Like Jessica said, is sometimes we look like maybe a year and a half or two out because sometimes we may or may not have like the position available, or it's just only a very limited number of openings for so many people. Because there's a lot of people now majoring in CS. And so there'll be times where we do give like technical workshops, like maybe teaching in React, JavaScript, HTML, web development of sorts, with student organizations. And we have also sponsored scholarships as well, conferences they have done. Let's see, I'm trying to think about some other things we have did. And inviting them to our office as well. So if you guys have like an office and you do require like your interns to come in person or just having an option to come in, then I would say maybe invite them out to host an activity like an employee panel and invite the hiring managers to come out to like speak with the students. Like we have hosted a lot of like campus field trips before locally here. And if you want to maybe send a bus to kind of like pick them up and drive them to your office, that could work as well. So just to get them and I give them an idea of like the culture and easily able to talk with people besides the people who go to like these events. So that's been kind of like some of the methods I have done. Obviously, there is trying to making sure that you want to put your name out there against all these other big names, right? So I try to add like a more personal touch to it and offer to do like coffee chats. I try to give them my contact information as much as I can and say, hey, message me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive. We'd love to help you out no matter what, even if you're not joining us at the moment. We'd love to be part of your journey to help you, find something that you would like. So trying to build those personal relationships really goes a long way. No matter if it's CS majors or any other major.
I love the fact that you mentioned getting hiring managers involved. I've noticed teams that are doing that and giving students an opportunity to meet the leaders within these different departments and who they'll be working with. That's huge. And I think there's plenty of teams that don't really give that opportunity. And so these students are kind of flying blind. They're not getting a sense of what the environment is going to be like or what the culture, what the expectations are. So I think that's really great. Fiona, Jessica, do you have anything to add? We do have some more questions coming in from the chat. Camilla asks, how would you recommend keeping in touch and maintaining the relationship with students who finish a co-op or internship at your organization and return back to school, specifically if you'd like to hire them full-time when they are wrapped up with their degree?
I guess I can speak to that. So generally for us, we're able to make a decision on whether we want to extend a return offer, like either by the time their internship ends or shortly after their internship ends, right? And so that's when we extend the return offer, and we hold it open for whatever the university guidelines recommends, right? So a lot of schools, it's usually like mid-October or even sometime in November, because we understand that they may also want to, consider and explore other opportunities. But in terms of how we keep them warm, like while they're doing all of that and making their decision, if we happen to visit on campus as we were able to do this academic year, we'll invite them out for dinner or something, right? It's like, hey, we're going to be visiting, the school, like, are you available? And then, so that's one way we keep them warm. Another way is just to make sure that the hiring manager and like their mentors, right, and other members of the team continue to reach out to them, check in with them to see, if they have any questions that have come up, like just to give advice in general, not even about closing, but even maybe just advice about like job searching, especially for members of the team who may have just graduated and are, fairly recent graduates themselves. So those are a couple of ways that we do that.
I'm taking some notes.
We don't always get our offers out right away. So that would be our goal, would be able to make those offers knowing that they're coming up to our graduation. If they are in our summer internships, for instance, and graduate either in like December or the following May, we would love to go ahead and get those offers out, but Mohawk operates very leanly. So they're more reactive for positions versus saying like, oh yes, we can hold headcount for 6 months from now. That doesn't usually happen. So we try to, very similar to what Fiona said, as we have a campus ambassador program. And so I have our students, our interns that sign up to be campus ambassador partners for us. So we use them for our on-campus recruiting events. So it's a way to keep them engaged. We take them out to dinner or breakfast or something while we're on campus. But then we also check in with them. So like I do something really simple. I send them cards, e-cards around the holidays or if something's going on. And then I have a list that I keep of who is graduating when. And so every semester I follow up with them and say, hey, like I have down that you're graduating in December. Are you still looking for something? What are you interested in? Would you like to come back to Mohawk? It's also part of our survey that we do at the end of each internship, as to find out, would they like to come back and work with us, or do they want to continue their internship into the school with us part-time? So going back on that data too, and looking at that. And so just making those phone calls of, hey, are you interested in something? And then talking to the hiring managers, you guys have something on your team, would you suggest them for a different team if you guys don't? And following up with them every semester as they get closer to graduation to say like, hey, we can work on something for you, or we have the Aspire positions open. Are you interested in one of those? And just those keep warm strategies. The simple e-cards, they actually love. I was surprised at how many of them actually write back and respond about those. But then again, just that keep warm strategy of checking in with them the semester that they're going to graduate kind of early on to see what their plans are and help them in any way, whether it's coming back to Mohawk or going somewhere else.
We talked about kind of upward mobility, or being able to kind of progress within the career and kind of communicating that. And that's kind of, I guess, related to promotions. I want to be a manager or a leader in X amount of time. But what about just training or mentorship or things like that? Do you have programs set up as these students come in where you already know that they're going to be within a training program? Are they meeting some of these mentors ahead of time? How are you managing that process? I would think that if you are managing that process, it would help with retention. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
So we actually just implemented a mentor program for the interns this past summer. So I actually pulled from our current full-time hires who were past interns and utilized them as our mentors because I figured they've been through the intern program. One, it's showing them that you can come have a career with Mohawk, but also offering them someone who's been in their shoes. And then I also tried to make sure that the mentors I partnered them with were actually in a different division or a different department. So that way they could learn more about a different area of Mohawk, but also have someone to talk to or vent to, because we all know sometimes they got to vent about something. And you might not want to do that to the people you're working with. So they would have someone to vent to that was outside of their department so they could have a bit more comfortability in sharing or talking about something. So I tried to be strategic in how we placed the mentors and how we did that program. But definitely a work in progress.
Understood.
I have done buddy programs on our side. So, because like with the students, and I used to be an intern myself too before, and sometimes it's kind of like hard to like make relationships when you first start a job, and so especially if you're remote too. On top of that, and so typically what I have done is kind of pair them up with like another intern, or well, a former intern, somebody who got converted and used to be an intern. So I would pair them up with that person and hopefully maybe a similar education background as them, or somebody that they would request a certain type of profile to kind of give them guidance and such. And so kind of helping them in that regards to just get some insights on how to navigate around the corporate culture, right? Or how to get started. Or if they can also be served as like a mentor too, if need be. And so, yeah, but we do have like a program like that where we support not just like the interns, but like anybody new starting out.
I think this ties in a little bit with EVP. And for those that are maybe unfamiliar with that term, employee value propositions. Are there any other EVPs that you think teams are effectively leveraging to kind of attract the right talent and again, drive that retention?
I think one of the things that we have in place that helps with that retention piece, especially for students who are interested in leadership one day, is we have a whole entire talent development team and almost like a talent development pyramid. And so our intern program is at the base of that pyramid. It's called Engage. And then we have that Aspire program that I mentioned for the recent grads, but it continues that development through all of Mohawk. And so there's a RISE program for our Ascend, for our like frontline managers, and then there's Rise for the mid-level managers, and then there's Lead for our VP, senior VP talent. And so there's always that potential for that growth. Those programs are all done by people. Word is slipping my mind. But they're nominated for that program. Can't believe I couldn't think of that word. But they're all it's a nomination-based program, and so they last for a year of leadership training. So you get a cohort, and so there's always that piece where people can come in and develop and continue that development. And Mohawk is really big on one of our guiding principles is reinvestment in people, which I tell our students all the time when we're out promoting Mohawk, is that Mohawk is great about if you have any sort of professional development you want to do or get into, they will provide it. They'll make sure they pay for it, and all of those kinds of things. So I love the fact that we continue that professional development or that progression, and that there's several different ways to go about it within Mohawk. So I think that's definitely one of the ways that we're able to retain talent is that they know those things are there and that they can continue that leadership development or that professional development once they're here.
That's great. Anything to add, Fiona or Winnie?
Yeah, I'll add I guess, slightly different perspective. Again, like we are a startup, right? And that's something that we really like lean into because if you think about like the life cycle of a company, right? There are just like certain things that are more appropriate or best for a certain stage of a company. And, we don't have, a Samba Nova university, right? Where like as any employee, it's like, oh, I want to take this class or this workshop and you can just take it, right? We're very much like, we're pretty lean, right? You learn by doing. But we really, try to foster it and live by, right, a culture where you're not boxed into any specific role or responsibility, right? So even though we are piloting like special like leadership acceleration programs and stuff, like even if you weren't nominated, right, to be a part of those programs, you're still able to explore and work on projects outside of like your direct team, right? Like we literally have people who were hardware engineers working on ML problems, right? And we have people who transition, and we also do not really restrict people from being able to take on projects because they're too junior or things like that, right? It's like, oh, you must have this job title, right, before you can do a certain thing. Like we really don't like that kind of mindset, and that's something that we like actively try to like unlearn, right? But in terms of structure, we understand, especially if you're new in career joining Samba Nova, obviously it's very exciting to be able to like put your hands right in many different pots, and also be able to make impact, but also there needs to be some structure. So all our new hires, including full-time or interns that come through our university recruiting program, are paired with mentors, right? And each team has their own onboarding process on top of the company-wide, like 2-week orientations that we do. We've also built out modules especially for our engineers, since that's our primary focus, to really get familiar with our code base, right? And not be scared of like breaking something, right? And that's something that we're working on building more modules for.
I bet that's a big draw. I think that's a great, cultural mindset to communicate to professionals and to talent that's coming in. I felt like Jessica was going to say something. Maybe not. Maybe I was just misinterpreting. Okay. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about DE&I, because I feel like this dovetails into recruitment programs with universities pretty well. From what you see, how do great university programs help to drive diversity and inclusion initiatives?
I would say it's definitely being able to figure out what the company is prioritizing first and foremost. I mean, it's definitely a topic that everybody is like aware of for sure, and so it's just kind of being very cognizant of how your approach is like, and what the openings you at least have first. And so because it really all matters about first and foremost if they can do the job, and comparing their competencies against that, right? And so from that, and figuring out like where is the talent coming, where we can target. And so there is a lot of like organizations and that we target, like for instance, Hispanic Student Business Associations. We also partner with like the Asian Business Student Association too. And so just kind of, they're pretty big organizations. And so trying to make a business case of why we would want to partner with them, and not just because, right? And so and just figuring out the demographics in terms of their student organization, like how much majors encompasses of that student organization that we hire from. If it's mostly accounting and finance, then that would be great for like, financial services, tax and auditing type of positions. And so that would be a good business case for you to help convince your leadership to invest in sponsoring those student organizations or invest in those campus recruiting events, because they have the demographics and majors that you're recruiting for the openings that you have. So I think that will help drive, a lot more of like those type of initiatives. If you're just starting out new, in those type of like with those type of goals, because we're facing, that type of like challenge too, and so just making sure that you have like a good reasoning and business case of why we should invest in these programs.
And if I'm not mistaken, data regarding student populations is pretty easy to obtain, right? So you can kind of, as you're doing research on schools that you want to engage with, you can kind of get a good sense of what the distribution is of their student population, correct?
Yeah, for sure. All those universities should have some sort of like demographics report of like not only how many majors have graduated, but ethnicity percentage as well, classification, also sourced by classification. And if you want to even go even more narrow and deep, and you can also add the acts of student officers for a demographic report of their makeup of their student organizations, which they usually should have something like that at least. So because whenever they want to partner with employers, they will be able to hand off that type of brochure, quote unquote, to the employers to convince them to sponsor them, right? So they usually have some sort of like report like that already. If you want to dive into deeper with student orgs.
I would say too, identifying for your company what DEI is or what you want to focus on, because there is a lot to it. So you might not want to tackle all pieces or demographics of DEI at one time. So identifying if you're trying to, increase your DEI strategies, your initiatives, or a certain gender or population or race for your organization, identifying what that is. And what that means for you, or what DEI means for your organization at the time. And then finding ways to also just promote or support those groups. So like we had an intern mention this summer about LGBTQ plus community and, how the company could support during Pride Month, or just even with just posts or hosting things or just showing support of it in that way, in different ways. So thinking about things like that, that's one of the things I think we're working on at Mohawk, is just identifying and understanding that, like, when somebody says DEI, are they talking about everything that encompasses, or are they meaning, oh, we need to increase our diversity in race, or we need to increase, genders and majors or areas that aren't normal or typical for that. So like increasing our female population in our engineering fields or our finance and accounting fields. Is it inclusive of that LGBTQ community and things like that? So just identifying what it is and trying not to tackle all of it at once, but making sure that you guys have a definition of it and understand what it is that you're trying to tackle at one point in time. And then just making sure that students feel supported. Is really, really what it boils down to. Again, like Fiona said, it's just that we care.
Yeah, and I'll just add on top of that definitely like get a sense from leadership of like, when we're, in university recruiting, like tasked with, and what about, from a diversity lens, like what does the program look like? What's the strategy? Is like, what exactly do they mean by that? Right. And then of course, like we individually also have some influence, right, on sort of like, hopefully, right, have some influence on sort of what that direction looks like. But beyond that, something that I have learned, and this is not specific to DEI, is that, again, our primary focus for university recruiting is for engineering. So across software and hardware engineering. And, obviously, and a lot of people are, graduating with CS degrees and things like that. But what I have learned in recruiting for Sampanova is we're sort of in a very niche area within software engineering. And so not all, like, yes, of course, at the university level, we're not expecting them to come in with, all the experiences, and already a lot of training is going to happen on the job. But even just the curriculum, right? What are the required courses is very different across schools. And so even when you're targeting, like, oh, we want to say, yeah, target more women studying CS, right? It's whether it's like a national organization or a particular program at a school, I think it is important to understand what is the curriculum and like what are the types of skills that they're learning. Just a very quick example, like most people who study CS that I've interacted with have not taken a compilers course. It's not a required course for a lot of schools, but UCSB is actually a required course, right? And that is a very relevant area of knowledge just to like have the fundamentals of. And so that's like another piece is like, again, at the end of the day, right, as Winnie said, it's about the skills, right? Or at least what are the minimum skills that we want to see? And then finding, right, students, right, across all demographics who meet that minimum requirement.
I want to be mindful of our time. We're almost at the top of the hour. I'd like to talk about ROI a little bit, if we could. Measurement, metrics, communication of success. How do you determine the success of recruiting events?
It is definitely a long-term investment, right? And sometimes we may not even have the openings right now, or are able to even have the ability to make offers that far out as well. We're also pretty reactive, kind of similar to Mohawk. But typically I do look at the number of applications we may have received over a period of time of how long we have partnered with like this student organization, for instance, right? Sometimes I also kind of like look at the costs by university or college too, of how much we're kind of spending. And then from there, I kind of, if we're able to make hires from like a particular event, even better, right? But sometimes, like I said, they supply for a later position. And so I do kind of keep track within like a 2-year time frame, typically to see, how they heard about us. Oh, they heard about us from a career fair 2 years ago. I'm like, okay, I can report it back make a note of that. So make sure you guys like keep track of like the events you have done, and so you can go back to and make note of that event, right? So even though you may not have maybe an actual hire from that event within that semester, that's totally fine. You can always defer it back to it later on. So, but obviously, if you feel like during that time of the event, if there's not much engagement going on at the career fair or info session, then you probably have a good idea of not wanting to do it again. But if you, but then just make sure to kind of get some feedback from your peers, whoever comes along with you as well. Maybe they have like a different perspective as versus somebody like me who will go to every single event. So I know which ones are like have more higher engagement versus others. But like the volunteers or employees that come with you, sometimes they may have a different perspective of maybe the quality is better than versus the quantity of people that you spoke with, right? So I guess it really depends on what it matters to you more and how much room you can juggle with your budget as well. If you can afford to spend on newer events that you haven't gone to and try it out. So but I say, just make sure you're organized and keep track of like how much you're spending for sure.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, basically what everything Whitney said. We use Greenhouse as our ATS. And so, and I think most ATSs have a very convenient way to track what source, right, an applicant is coming through. I think for us, something that we had to kind of adjust is the level of granularity, right? Like we started with like, let's have this unique source for every single event. And then it's like, okay, no one has time to dig into that level of details. Like, okay, one layer of like, let's just do it by school, right? And then we are actually a customer of GEMS, and something that I really like that we don't get as much through Greenhouse reporting features is being able to very easily see by source, right? What are the pass-through rates? And we can, break it down by different demographics as well, so that, we used our first year using GEM to kind of help benchmark, like what is the baseline, right? And then kind of looking at what that is, and then just looking year over year to see what are, areas within our process or the types of events that we do that we can sort of iterate and optimize and improve upon.
Closing remarks, Jessica? We're just about out of time, but if you've got something to add.
I was just going to say quickly, we use Yellow, and our ATS is Success Factor. So we use Yellow to track our events, and students are able to sign in and create a profile. So we can, if we are integrated, which we're not, other places are, it automatically pulls all of those profiles from Yellow into Success Factor. So we can easily track how many people we talked to at events, if they applied to anything, and then if we actually hired them. So it's nice to be able to have that. Ripple Match does the same thing. I know there's several others out there that do things like that, where you can track attendance at events and keep up with them. It stores their resumes and all that. So we even use it for our senior recruiting team. Will come back to us and say, hey, can you go search for candidates for me that, had this major who maybe graduated 2 or 3 years ago. So we're able to go back and pull those things from them.
Sounds like tracking is very, very important, and good data in is going to be good data out. So just making sure that whatever system you're implementing, that you've got good communication and that you're attributing the right information to the right sources and things like that, which will help you probably in the future as you try to determine where to invest dollars within different organizations and things like that. We are out of time. I could really continue talking to you all for another hour easily. But we've got a break because we're out of time. I want to, again, big thank you to Jim and to Zoe for making this webinar possible. Jessica, Winnie, Fiona, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules and joining us on this panel. I'd love to work with you on future content. Everybody out there in the audience, thank you for tuning in. If you have suggestions for content or topics that we should be covering, please reach out and let me know. And if you want to be involved with our program, we're always looking for additional speakers to include on panels just like this one. So please keep in touch, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.